moved to Los Angeles, shopped the record labels, did the gigs, released the albums. And I quickly realized, wow, I'm not really built to be a musician. I'm not really a night person, for one. And the gigs, they happen at night. And then the music business itself, it's just a tricky business to be in. There's not a lot of correlation between success and talent or even hard work.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome to AI and the Future of Work, episode 297. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. If you enjoy what we do, please tell a friend and give us a like and a rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. If you leave a comment, I'll be sure to share it in an upcoming episode. Like this awesome one from Meyer in Wichita, who says his favorite episode is the conversation with Navrina Singh. Oh, one of my favorites as well. Credo AI CEO. Meyer listens each week while cooking dinner. He adds that he makes a mean chili con queso. Personally, I get my recipes from ChatGPT. But hey, if you want to up your chili game, DM me and I will connect you to Meyer. And go listen to that amazing episode with Navrina if you haven't already. Of course, we learn from AI thought leaders weekly on this show. And the added bonus, you get one AI fun fact. Today's fun fact, Jill Barth writes about the 8 principles ethical AI at work is teaching us in HR Executive Online. They all come from the recent AI fact sheet published by the White House. I will summarize all 8, but I encourage you to read the full article. We'll share that link. Number 1, workers should have input into the design, development, and oversight of workplace AI systems. Number 2, AI systems should be designed and trained in a way that protects workers. Number 3, organizations should have clear governance, oversight, and evaluation processes for workplace AI. Number 4, employers should be transparent about AI systems used in the workplace. Number 5, AI systems should not violate workers' rights to organize, health and safety rights, wage rights, or anti-discrimination protections. Number 6, AI systems should assist, complement, and enable workers while improving job quality. Number 7, employers should support or upskill workers during AI-related job transitions. And number 8, workers' data used by AI systems should be limited, used for legitimate business purposes only, and of course, handled responsibly. A good set of 8 principles to live by. Of course, we will link to the full article in today's show notes. Now, shifting to today's amazing conversation. Josh Allan Dykstra is a polymath who has achieved great things as a TEDx speaker. He's a published author, a musician, and a CEO. Josh is a sought-after coach on all topics related to the future of work by companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, and Chanel. Josh started Lovework to create energy-based organizations that helps every team believe work life can be a source of positivity. Josh is also the author of Igniting the Invisible Tribe. And there's just about nothing Josh hasn't done or tried. We met a few months back, and after probably 10 minutes of getting to know each other, that Josh Allan Dykstra energy rubbed off on me, and I said, I got to have this community meet Josh. Without further ado, my friend Josh, it's my pleasure to welcome you to AI and the Future of Work. Let's get started by having you share a bit more about your background and how you got into the space.
Thank you so much, Dan. What an intro. Wow. Thank you. Such a pleasure to be with you. Yeah. So I got into this space. You mentioned music in your bio there, your intro. And that was the beginning for me, actually. So I left university and I thought I was going to be a performing musician. I'm a classically trained pianist. I play a lot of instruments. And I thought, I'm going to make a big dent in the universe by playing music, right? Music is a really special thing that touches the hearts of people. And so I took it really seriously. I got a manager, moved to Los Angeles, shopped the record labels, did the gigs, released the albums. And I quickly realized, wow, I'm not really built to be a musician. I'm not really a night person, for one. And, the gigs, they happen at night. And then the music business itself, it's just a tricky business to be in. There's not a lot of correlation between success and talent or even hard work. And so I was like, ugh, that doesn't seem like it's the right thing. And so I was like, I know I don't want to do music, but what do I want to do instead? And so I started looking back at all these different jobs that I had when I was a musician, because you work, a whole bunch of other jobs because music doesn't pay your bills. And so I started to notice a pattern with all of these different weird jobs that I'd had. Is that when my job was better, my life was better. When my boss was good, my enjoyment of my overall life was nicer. And so I was like, wow, and the vice versa was true, right? When my boss was crappy, my life was crappy. And I was like, what? This is really interesting. And so I reflected on that a bit, and then I did some more research, and then I saw this isn't a Josh story. This is an everybody story. Like everybody, by and large, right? If almost all of us work, almost none of us like it. And to me, this was a big problem that needed solving. And I like complexity, and I like to do a lot of different things. And so I thought, wow, if I could help make work not suck so bad for as many people as humanly possible, that seems like a cool dent to leave in the universe too, right? It's not exactly music, but it is leaving a big dent in the universe. And so I switched, singing to speaking, and I started writing books instead of songs. And so I still get to be on stage, and I still get that kind of fix of being in front of people and sharing myself but I can share my thoughts, in talks and things like that now. And so that's how I got in here. And so that's all I've been doing for the last 15 years is trying to make work not suck for as many humans as possible.
You and I both use that same term, putting a little dent in the universe. So when you think about the difference between your vision for what work could be like versus the actual work that most employees experience today, what's the delta?
Yeah. Yeah. I like to talk a lot about revolution. I've had this project called the Work Revolution for a lot of years, and hopefully we'll be rebooting our podcast under that name soon. But yeah, this idea of a work revolution. But when I say revolution, what I mean is that it's a complete turnaround. So it's just like the earth does a revolution around the sun, right? It's a complete turnaround. And so I think this is really what needs to happen with work in a lot of ways, right? That it needs a complete turnaround. So sometimes I think about it like the movie The Matrix. People might remember this, that there's the robots in the Matrix that kind of feed on the humans as batteries. Spoiler alert, sorry. But I think business, by and large, is like that, right? Right now, we plug into our humans as the batteries, and then we suck the juice out of humans in order to output things for the business. And my vision really flips that around, right? So my vision, and you mentioned an energy-based way of working, and this is what I mean by that, is that the work systems themselves exist to give energy to the people, right? Not to extract energy from the people, but give them energy. Because what happens when you give people energy is they do better work. They actually output more. They take better care of your customers. They actually, can work longer and harder. They get more into flow states. They enjoy their work more. So there's no downside to giving people more energy. It's just that work has it backwards right now. We can think of extracting from people instead of giving to people. And so that is really, I think, the fundamental difference in my view.
So I've heard you talk frequently in your TED Talk and elsewhere about this concept of work healing the world. And let's say you're talking to skeptics who say, you know what, Josh, the world's kind of broken. Like we've got global warming and famine, and we've got wars, and there's a lot of hate out there. And you're going to tell me that, really the fix is work. Maybe defend that statement.
Yeah, absolutely. So I called my TED Talk, how work can heal the world, back in 2018 when this came out. It felt novel, right? And now for me, it's what else could fix it? So what else could actually heal the world? So let's think about that for a second, because work is the organizing story of humanity right now. So when we think about what organizes our lives, largely it's work, right? Work determines where you live, how much money you have, how much discretionary income you can spend. In the US, it determines if you have health care or not. Like work that determines who you see the most. You probably see your work people more than you see your family or your friends outside of work, right? So work is very deterministic of our lives. And right now it is the organizing, I would argue it's the organizing story of humanity. Right? It determines when we wake up in the morning, when we go to sleep, right? It's hard to find something in one's life that isn't determined by the work that they do. So I don't think there's any coincidence, right? That's one of the first questions we ask when we meet somebody. It's like, what do you do? Because it really does predict a lot about one's life. And so when I say now when I think about, how work can heal the world, I really think, I don't know if there's anything else that can. And so when I talk about work too, I want to say that I'm using the word work as largely as a proxy for business as a whole. And then business is kind of part of the larger container of capitalism, right? Which like our understanding of what capitalism is today is largely a brand of crony capitalism, right? It's this very kind of entangled mess of special interests and very wealthy people that have gotten tangled up in to what we think is a free market, but it really is not, because it's bought and sold by the folks who have the most resources to do so and can lobby for what they want. And so we've got this kind of thing, right? This thing and so there's a lot wrapped up in the word when I say work, right? It is that whole system of industrialization and extraction from the planet, and this kind of like notion of continuing consumption, or like all of that gets wrapped up, I think, when we say we've got to fix that and that kind of mindset if we want to heal the world. So really, I think what we need is a different organizing story of humanity. I think we need a different thing to organize around rather than this kind of endless consumption kind of bullshit. Like that is not a story that gets humanity anywhere good. And so we need a different organizing story, I believe.
I believe that a lot of how we think about our self-worth, how we value ourselves, is directly related to the work that we do, or the output, our work product. And in the HR tech community, in the HR community, we talk about people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses.
Yep.
And slightly disturbing, but I think factually accurate statement is that you spend more time with your boss than you do with your spouse, with your significant other. And given that, I frequently say the world of work will change more in the next 3 years than it has in the previous 300, like literally since the first industrial revolution. Given, to the extent you agree or even disagree with that thesis, think about what's up ahead, the next couple of years of work, and why we should be encouraging employees to maybe embrace or celebrate the fact that things are changing and take this opportunity to shape that new world of work that we're about to enter.
Yeah, I tend to be a believer in. I do think we'll probably see a lot of transition in the next 3 years, but I tend to think that we've probably got a solid decade of difficulty ahead of us. So I'm a believer in the fourth turning kind of philosophy. I can't remember if you and I have talked about that, Dan, or if listeners are familiar, but if you're not, go check it out. But it's this kind of idea that humanity goes through these cycles of change and then like seasons, right? So we're in a winter season right now. And so there's a lot of decay and death that happens in winter before spring can come and new things can be born. So I'm a believer of this theory that right now we're in a winter season. And I think, that the next, 5 to 10 years probably it's probably going to get worse and more complicated. It's going to look darker probably before the dawn comes, but the dawn will come, right? Like we will get to rebuild something next. There will be a spring season. And so this is what I spend a lot of time thinking about right now is, what do we want to build? Hopefully, fingers crossed, right? We get to stick around and help rebuild something, 10 years from now. Like, what is that thing? And what kind of seeds should we be planting now? To have the things that we want to grow, have them start sprouting. And so that's the stuff that I'm thinking a lot about right now. And I think right now we're in a tricky spot. I think with everybody's attention is focused on AI. It's just like that is like the spotlight right now. And we're all curious and we're all looking at that. And then at least in the workspace. And it's a little bit, I'm grateful for people like you, Dan, because I think you're helping to shine a light on how all of this, and how do we make sense of all of this? Because it's complex and it's changing very fast and hard to keep up. But the stuff that I get most concerned about is the human side of this equation. And so it really plays into the fact that you shared at the beginning, the article you shared at the very beginning today. We're like, we've got all this new technology coming online, but at the end of the day, it's humans. We get to decide what kind of guardrails we put around this, what kind of ground rules we want to set. Like, how are we going to take care of the workers, right? Because this isn't just going to happen. Yeah, there's a lot of thought, I think, and care that needs to go into how are we going to make sure that the folks who are doing the work actually get to experience some sort of joy in the work that they get to do, or is that a priority for us? Right? As a species, like we're going to have to contend with that in the next 3 to 10 years. What is important? Are we just going to keep building things that, yeah, what kind of things are we going to build, and what rules are we going to put around them? So that's the stuff that I'm really concerned about.
Talking to a lot of entrepreneurs who are, I'm sure, nodding in vigorous agreement with what you said and want spring to be here. They want to see those green shoots coming out of the ground. What's your coaching to them about how can we as a community of people who care about defining a better future for employees, what can they do now to start preparing for spring?
Yeah. Yeah, for me, the most helpful principle is this kind of energy centric one. So that really take a look at your business systems, and you could do an audit and try to figure like, are these systems actually adding life to people, adding energy to people, or are they sucking it out? Because they really can't do both, right? Do you have a meeting that's actually helping people move forward, or does this meeting suck the life out of everybody that comes to it? Does this technology that we use, is it just there because we've been using it for the last 10 years? Get rid of it, right? So do an energy audit throughout your whole company and try to determine, like, you can do this just from top to bottom and try to sort out, like you could even rank your systems and say these things, give a lot of energy to people or they suck it out. Do it on a scale if you want to. So however you do it, get a sense of these are the things that actually add life and energy to people. These are the things that do not. And then make a freaking plan to get rid of the things that do not. Like, just be really proactive about these things. And so I would say look at the systems, the processes, the technology that you use, like all of that kind of stuff, because that stuff just can just suck the life out of your workforce faster than anything. Then the other thing you got to do is the opposite of that, is try to start learning what brings energy to each person. So each person is going to have a unique, and I talk about this a little bit in the TED Talk if people want more, but people are energized by different things. Different people like different things. And so everybody has a unique battery inside them that lights them up and recharges their battery. And certain activities make them feel alive and great and in flow and focused. And other activities just make them go dim, right? It just turns their lights off. It makes you dull. It makes you unfocused. Most of us don't have a lot of what we would call energy intelligence. Right? We don't actually know that much about our own battery. And so this is the other place that I would encourage leaders to look, is at themselves. Definitely understand this about yourself. Like, you have to understand this if you want to put yourself in a flow state more frequently and be at your best more often. You have to. And because you have to do more things that energize you and less things that drain you. But then you have to do that with everybody around you at work. And when you do this, what you find, and this is where the magic happens, because when you start to actually do this in earnest with your team, almost all of the stuff that like typical HR teams spend a lot of money and time and like a lot of like HR tech, it spends a lot of time on performance management systems and like all sorts of like just complex processes and 9 boxes and like just so much complex stuff that happens inside the world of organizational design and talent management. Doesn't really need to happen. If you just focus on helping people do more of what energizes them, and that they're in a job where they get to do a lot of that, so much of this other stuff is unnecessary. So a huge part of what I'm preaching to y'all is like, you can really simplify your business if you take this approach, which I think maybe hopefully sounds refreshing, because man, business feels complex to me right now.
You alluded to the changing nature of organizations, and you and I think a lot about organizational structure and how the structure can dictate the experience that employees have. And one of the most obvious things that's impacting the structure of organizations is a shift to hybrid or even remote first work. What can we do to turn that into an opportunity, as opposed to what I think many employers see it as a tax or a challenge for the business? But I think there's another side of it, which is how it can create opportunities to engage teams more and maybe even humanize work, which is a little ironic. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think absolutely hybrid is tricky, mostly because people weren't really trained on how to do it, right? We all got thrown into it, and now we're maybe in a rhythm of it, right? We maybe done it a lot, but I don't know that means that we're doing it well. So I think there is a lot of opportunity here, and what we need to realize, I think, is that hybrid remote is it's functionally different, right? It's a different kind of structure, and therefore it requires different practices. So, for example, like I would say, like one of the simplest things is when we think about hybrid is to try to actually not do hybrid, right? Like everybody should be on a camera. Don't put a bunch of people in the same conference room and then some people are off, and like just like try to keep a pureness to the remote quality. If you're going to be doing a remote meeting, put everybody, in their own Zoom window, that kind of thing. So it's a simple tactical thing. But I think if you deconstruct that, it becomes about the philosophy. It becomes a little bit about an equity, equality kind of thing. Like, how do we put people on the same kind of footing? Because the danger of this stuff is that it creates classes. And we don't mean to do this, but we're just naturally filter the world through our lenses of bias. Right? It helps us function, but it also doesn't. It does really bad things and unintentionally to our cultures. And so we have to find a way to level set these things. And so I think that you can use certain video techniques to do that. The other thing really think that matters a lot is making sure if people are spending a lot of time virtually, that they're getting time to just be humans together. Right? This is the big thing that gets easily lost in more of a remote context where we don't cross paths with. I don't see my colleagues in the hallway because there's no hallway. And so I have to deliberately put time at the start of my meeting where we can actually just be human together. And it doesn't need to be a huge amount of time. But this is one of the things we learned through the Love Work Project is just create an intentional space where people can be human together and just check in. And I see more teams doing this now, which is really encouraging. But it's simple things like that just become like kind of basic hygiene in the world of remote and hybrid. And the hardest part of some of this stuff, I think, Dan, is the keeping doing of it. It's to just hold the space, right? If you're a leader meeting with your team on Zoom or Teams or whatever, that you do this every time, that you always create a moment at the beginning of your team meeting to just be humans together. And the hard part is to like not skip it. Oh man, I've got a lot to do today. I've got a fire to put out. I've got this to do. We've got a whole big agenda. No, you got to hold the space for it. And I think sometimes that's the hardest thing. It's just like continuing to do this over and over to continue holding that space.
Let's say the revolution has happened and Josh and Dan are back here and it's 2034 instead of 2024. And we're having a version of this conversation. What's one thing that you'd say is just fundamentally different about the world of work that today might just seem like science fiction?
I have to say my podcast co-host was looking over my shoulder and saw this question and just immediately said, love. And I was like, oh, that is, I don't know if I can beat that answer. That is, if I get to wave my magic wand, of course, none of us get to do that. But if we put a lot of work in over the next decade and transform things, I think we see a lot more love in the workplace. I think there's really this transition from fear to love that does need to happen across the way that we work. So much of our work and the way that we approach business is fear driven. And that just doesn't create great outcomes. Like we've been able to create productivity, but I would wager if we actually had a love-based architecture, who knows what we could have accomplished by now. Right? So I do think I want to see a lot more love 10 years from now. The other thing that I would say I think we'll see is more self-managing structures. And I think this is going to be born out of necessity, out of complexity. Like we're already seeing managers and leaders, especially in the hybrid remote kind of world we now live in. It's impossible to keep our arms around the complexity of what are all my people doing? I haven't the faintest clue, right? There's no way for me to then, and I couldn't really know before, but we had this illusion that I could keep my tabs on it because we were in the same office or they're down the hall or in the cubicle or whatever. But like now it's just completely apparent. I don't have a clue what they're doing all day. So we have to get better at self-managing structures and creating containers for people to do that. And there's lots of great examples of how to do that. But I think pretty sure 10 years from now, we're just going to see a lot more kind of biomimicry in the way that we think about organizations as organisms that have more self-managing pieces to them, maybe entirely. Yeah.
Okay, so to the extent today's work architecture is fear-based, and we want to get to one that's love-based, it's a little bit ambiguous or a little bit hard to define. So for managers who are saying, yeah, I want a quote love-based work architecture, how do you know when we're there? And then what are the attributes of a fear-based work architecture that might characterize work today?
Sure. So yeah, so the one thing I would say is, this isn't a painting that's ever done being painted. So we're never going to get there, but like we can keep like trying to get there. And I think that's part of the adventure. At the core, I tend to think the fear-based architecture of today is largely based around a couple of things and things that you can see that have just infiltrated our companies, at large. And the first one is coercion. So when you think about a top-down structure, like the whole thing is filled with coercion. So we've created this fiat hierarchy where people have to do what I say simply because I have a title that tells them I get to tell them what to do. It's not because I'm more qualified. It's not because have more expertise. Maybe I do, but not necessarily. It's really just because like somehow I got this title. And then we get the stack of titles on top of each other. And what this means is that that coercion is baked into the operating system, right? That metaphorically, you as the employee have to do what I as the manager say because I have a metaphorical gun to your head, right? I can fire you. I can take away your livelihood, your health care. So you must, even if you vehemently disagree with me, and you know that what I'm telling you to do is stupid, you still have, right? This kind of coercion is built into the hierarchical architecture of the way we run companies. And it doesn't produce, shocking, you don't actually do your best work with a gun to your head. Right? So this is just not a good idea. And so when I say fear-based, you can see it baked into the operating system of work. Because when we're using that structure, coercion is just built into the whole thing. So that's probably the biggest one.
What are the attributes of a love-first work culture?
Yeah. So if you think about flipping that around, if we do like a revolution thing on it, then what we've got participation. So everybody gets to show up, adult to adult. We get rid of the parent-child relationship. We're all in communication as colleagues, not as boss-employee. We're colleagues, we're peers. We come and maybe we defer to each other based on expertise, right? That's probably a smart thing to do. But it's not you're listening to me just because I've been here longer or because I've got a fancy title, right? It's that, no, the best ideas win. We actually get to surface those. And right, so you've got a lot of psychological safety in these environments. So yeah, if you want to switch, from fear to love, right? The task for you as a leader or as a manager is to create more psychologically safe environments. And there's some really great folks that you can, I can point you some resources, at the end of this show if you want, Dan. But for places people could go to learn more about that, but really that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to create environments of psychological safety where people are interacting adult to adult, colleague to colleague. You get rid of these weird parent-child dynamics. And then what you start to see is that, oh, you know what? I don't feel so afraid anymore. I don't feel so afraid to share my opinion or speak up, even when I'm talking to the owner of the company or someone who's been here for 30 years, right? In that kind of environment, it doesn't matter because everybody's just looking out for the best interest of the mission of the company. That's the other thing I would say is in these love-based companies, everybody works for the mission. Right? We all serve at the pleasure of a mission. We don't serve at the pleasure of the boss, right? The boss is not a person. The boss is a larger mission that we're all trying to get after.
Brilliantly said. I like the way you put that. We're about out of time, but I'm not letting you off the hot seat without answering one last question for me. As we've been getting to know each other, think about, that version of Josh on stage, making beautiful music and creating, positive energy for, let's say, a room full, stadium full, whatever it is, a relatively small group of people who you get to change their life for an evening. Given what you've talked about, love work and future of organizations, I know that you're so ambitious and that you want to be able to have that impact on a lot more people than just a room full of concert goers. What will Josh Allan Dykstra's enduring impact be on the world of work?
I hope this energy-centric model of organization design catches on. I hope people start to grasp it, right? That there's a way to do this that actually gives people energy instead of sucks it out. So I hope that's one of those things that I think can endure. I hope it does. And then the other one that I hope is some sort of contribution. This is my next project, is this idea of a new organizing story, that somehow we can move humanity from this kind of current endless consumption, profit at all costs story to something that's more sustainable co-creation with this world that we all live in, this planet that we share, right? There has to be a different kind of story that organizes us as a species. And so that's my next obsession. And I don't know if I have all the eloquent words to describe it yet, but hopefully people get a glimpse of. And that's the other thing I want to really contribute, I think, with the next chapter that I'm moving into.
Josh, when it's springtime and orgs are energy based and we get to celebrate some of the way work is changing, I hope that you'll come back and have another version of this conversation.
Anytime, Dan. It's such a pleasure.
Good. I've enjoyed it as well. Before I can let you go, where can the audience learn more about you, your music, the work that you're doing, love work? Where do they go?
Yeah, the best place is probably you can go to my website, which is josh.com. So it's ALAN, 2 A's, 2 L's, joshallan.com. And there's contact form there. And there's, so that's maybe the jumping off point. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, find me. I'm on pretty much all social media. My handle is Josh Allan, just about everywhere. So you can find me there. And yeah, I think if you go there, you'll be able to find Love Work or Work Revolution podcast or all the other stuff that I do, or my books or whatever. But yeah, maybe just head to joshallan.com.
Brilliant. I really enjoyed this one and I look forward to continuing it. Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you, Dan. Me too.
Excellent. Gosh, that's all the time we have for this week on AI and the future of work. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin from People Rain. And of course, we're back next week with another fascinating guest.